Climate change and urbanization are two of the very big challenges of the 21st century, and they are very much intertwined. Heat waves, heavy rain and floods are experienced in many, many cities, and at the same time, the demand for adequate housing, for energy, for mobility service is rising. So we asked our digital audience via Twitter, we asked you, what do you think? Will the EU manage to organize climate neutrality by 2050? And you answered to us. You said, 21% said yes, the EU will manage. 60.6% said no, never. And 18% said they don't really know. So what really has to change? What is the call for action? That are the questions we are going to tackle today. We want to know if thinking globally and acting locally is the answer. Is that a suitable approach to rethink urban development in times of climate change? Is that possible and feasible to rethink urban development, to plan it newly and to create new governance structures? So our claim for today is climate
justice.
Now I'm very happy to introduce to you 4 PhD candidates of the Global Center of Spatial Methods for Urban Sustainability at the Technical University of Berlin. They are now sharing their moving insights into the very precise situations in their countries on how high CO2 emissions in the global north are affecting their life quality and really endangering various vulnerable groups. What are their creative ideas on how to create climate justice and what are their claims? I'm now asking, first of all, Upasana from India. She is researching in ICD4D, which is Information and Communication Technology for Development and Community Networks. So we are very, very keen on your insights. The floor is yours, Upasana.
Hello, I'm Upasana. I am going to talk about Chennai, which is the capital city of Tamil Nadu, which is a state in South India. Chennai is a metro city with a population of around 8.6 million. And it's a coastal city, and in terms of the climate, Chennai is hot throughout the year. There's a thin window of rain, which is from October to December. And as a consequence of climate change, the region has seen really erratic monsoon in the past few years. There have been frequent cyclones and floods in the region. In fact, it was just this week that there was another cyclone in Chennai. But what I would like to focus on is a drought that happened in the city in 2019. And I want to talk about this because the drought brought to focus the idea of a climate emergency, which is when the effects of climate change are exacerbated by issues in urban planning and urban governance, and they turn into emergency situations. So what happened in 2019 was that the city had not seen rain in a long time, in a lot of months. And by the time it was the summer, the city was running out of water. And anyone who owned land would dig bore wells into the ground to get water. But the rest of the city would have to depend on private tanks for water, which was really expensive. And they would basically have to wait for the tanks to come and then wait with their buckets to get the water, as you can see in the picture. And this got really expensive in a city where the population is really high, and the significant portion of the population is working class. And this really reveals how during a climate emergency, or whenever there's an effect of climate change, it's really the groups that are already in vulnerable positions that bear the entire impact of the situation, that have no security in the situation. And it is this fact that it is this power imbalance, really, that we must be mindful of when we're having a conversation about climate justice. Because when we start to think about it as a social or a moral or an ethical problem, as an ethical issue, then it's important to look beyond individual actions because they're not really effective. It's important to look at that as a collective problem, as an issue of collective rights, as an issue of community rights. And at the level of decision making, it needs to be important to focus on the rights of communities, of indigenous people, of indigenous resources and knowledge systems. And that's what climate justice should mean at the level of a decision-making paradigm. And I think this is where, as researchers, we play a role, because it's not just collaboration between academia and policy making that is going to be effective. Obviously, we need a lot more work into scrutinizing the impact of public policies, into understanding how industries have complied with public policy, but we also need to be more conscious and reflexive in trying to understand what sort of knowledge systems we're legitimizing. Can we focus on more local and indigenous systems of adapting to climate change? We need more qualitative and ethnographic research as well on understanding how people negotiate with the effects of climate change on a very everyday basis. What are their tactics of adaptation? And these are the things that we increasingly need to focus on. What I basically mean to say is that as researchers, we really need to be more political and more politically conscious and deliberate in the research that we are conducting.
Thank you very much, Upasna. Interestingly, you have been talking about the shift of paradigm and the responsibility of academia. And I think this is a subject we are also going to tackle with Nkemjika from Nigeria. She's an architect by profession, and she's researching on sustainable and affordable housing. Now, very much looking to your insights.
Thank you very much. My name is Nkemjika. I'm from Nigeria, and I live in Enugu State, which is one of the 36 states in Nigeria with a population of about 3 million. Enugu is a landlocked, hilly region with mainly 2 seasons in a year, like every other part of Nigeria. We have the rainy season and the dry season. And then we have climate, we have temperature differences ranging from 15 to 34 degrees, depending on the season of the year. But of course, over the years, these temperature ranges have variated due to climate change. And there are even more adverse effects of climate change in the state and several parts of Nigeria, including erosion and flooding. Now, the government on the state and local level have tried to embark on projects to preserve the natural environment and stem the effects of climate change. Like the forest I'm standing in right now is actually a forest reservation project by the government, as a climate change mitigation effort. And then there are other intervention projects that the government has embarked on with support from the World Bank, like early warning, risk assessment and risk management actions to aid the victims of flooding. But these actions have not been able to cater for everyone who is affected or who is a victim of these flooding incidents. If we look at a state like Kogi in Nigeria, where there are regular floodings, the citizens and the indigents have had to find a way to cope. So when there's a threat of flood, they actually just move to maybe a higher ground or a higher altitude and wait for these floods to recede. But we see in recent times the increase in climate change effects, and combined with anthropogenic activities, have led to more and more loss of livelihoods. And I think this is where the issue of climate justice comes in, because now we're not just talking about natural metaphoric actions that climate change has brought about, but we're also looking at how human activities contribute to the negative climate change effects, and how they affect the local residents and those who depend on these environments for their livelihoods, for survival also. So we're looking at the fact that these activities are actually depriving people from their basic means of livelihood. And in this respect, we also see that those who suffer the most are not the main contributors to the activities that cause these effects. And here we now see that there's a problem of social injustice or social inequality. If we go down south to the Niger Delta region in Nigeria, we see a stark reality there because we have oil companies who engage in industrial activities that have proven harmful to the environment, proven harmful to the climate of that region, and have also deprived the local residents of their means of livelihood. You have farmers and fishermen and people who reside in the neighborhood and in these communities being exposed to health hazards that have even caused loss of lives. And now, because the government has a vested interest in these companies, and because of the lax environmental laws already in place, we find out that it's the residents themselves who suffer the most. And because of these, there have been rising clashes between the government and the people, between the people and the companies. But I feel the government has a responsibility to regulate, to check the activities of these companies to make sure that they are not imposing adverse effects on the residents of the communities. And this is where we as researchers come in, because on a regular basis, there are researches done to see how we can coexist in our environment without depleting what we already have, without bringing such negative effects to the same environment that sustains us. For instance, in my field and in the field of construction, there are researches and innovations on passive design, researches and innovations on resilient buildings, on lean construction, zero energy designs and constructions. And I feel that these are supposed to form the basis of policy making and how they can be adapted in a situation like Nigeria. So as researchers, it's not just about having the facts and having the findings, but we have to become part of the policymakers. We have to be part of those who enact the laws, because I feel this is going to be of huge benefit to a country like mine when it comes to climate change policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nkemjika. We will dig deeper on the question of urban planning and how buildings can be resilient and policymaking, etc., to change conditions later in the talk. I'm now happy to stay on the African continent. We'll do so with Boniface from Zimbabwe. He's a sociologist. He's working on spatial inequality in cities and on urban sociology. And he calls himself a young Pan-African, very passionate about the engaging of the youth and about the engagement of young people. So what is your stake?
Thank you, Andrea, for the humble introduction. I am Boniface from Zimbabwe. I come from the city of Harare, which is the capital city of Zimbabwe. We do have a very stable climate. We have temperatures that range from 20 degrees to about 35 degrees. But one of the major ways in which climate change has affected our city has been episodic droughts, sporadic rainfall patterns. We've also been dealing with episodic heat waves, and we've also been dealing with water scarcity as one of the major challenges. I think what is important to recognize in this context is that water scarcity in my city has been a problem we've had for decades. It is important to acknowledge that one of the reasons why this has been happening is because of dilapidated infrastructure. The city was designed to accommodate about 300,000 residents. Now it is home to over 2 million people. And so the infrastructure itself has been a problem. But whilst the infrastructure has been a problem, it is important that we acknowledge that this has been exacerbated by the dwindling water resources supplying the city. The city's water reservoirs have been running dry, and it's imperative that we also highlight that this challenge is beginning to affect the most vulnerable parts of our communities. As you can see in the image behind me, you realize that women and children are the most affected by this water scarcity problem that we are facing. This then brings into play issues of climate justice, because it's important for us to acknowledge that whilst decisions can be made on a political level, their consequences are felt on a micro level in societies amongst vulnerable groups who in fact have a lower carbon footprint. Whilst the decisions are made by big politicians, it's important that they take into cognizance these micro issues, the vulnerable communities, how they impact on women and children, amongst other issues. I think this is where we then come in as academics to inform policymakers, to inform government about some of these lived realities. Whilst other people may take it for granted in other contexts to have a shower, to simply open a tap and drink water, in my community, this has become a privilege that cannot actually be experienced by many. So it's important for us as academics to carry out researches that bring to light some of these issues that would otherwise be overlooked when making policies related to climate change. I think I would want to commend the direction we are taking so far as academia in Zimbabwe. We have established innovation hubs across the state universities, and these innovation hubs provide funding for projects that are geared towards climate change and adaptability. We have a project which is trying to look at drought-resistant grains. We have another project which is looking at propagation techniques for indigenous herbs and fruits. And these are amongst some of the many initiatives that we are taking towards food security and climate adaptation. And I believe this is a role that we need to be taking as academics across the board. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Boniface, also for your insight. Now we go to the global southeast, but we stick with the subject of global interdependencies in times of climate crisis. And now we will hear the last input from John from Indonesia. He's a researcher and he's focusing on urban participatory, and that's very important to him, planning.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, nice to talk to you from here. My name is John Peterstralan. I am from Indonesia in Southeast ASEAN. I originally from Kupang, a city in eastern part of Indonesia. Kupang is medium-sized city in Indonesia and the capital of East Nusa Tenggara province. Topographically, Kupang consists of coastal areas, lowlands, and hills. Some of the inhabitants are fishermen, and the suburban area, the inhabitants work as farmer, and the farming system is subsistence. The both is close related to climate condition. Kupang has a tropical savanna climate with 2 seasons, the dry season and the rainy season. The city is led by a mayor who has authority to plan and build the city. And the government system is a top-down system. Climate change comes through direct impact for the inhabitants in Kupang city. In their daily life, climate change comes in the form of climate uncertainty, which result ultimately in high vulnerability. The dry season is getting longer and we can find drought everywhere. In the long dry season, the inhabitants find the difficulty to access water. Then they have to buy from tankers at a high cost. For the poor, they have to walk in long distances to reach water resources that still are flowing. So this picture can show you the situation that I explained to you. The local government, I think, not really take a high concern for the climate change impact for the locals. The city mayors more focus on build parks to beautify the city. So this policy is often opposed by the civil society, such as yacht groups, academia, NGO, and environmental activists who are organizing a movement to continue promote climate change mitigation. So from this side, I want to talk about climate justice. To me, climate change is an issue of climate justice, global justice, because it is result of human action, or we'll call it anthropogenic. Together as humans, we must share responsibility for reducing climate change impact, especially for vulnerable groups, such as farmers, fishermen, and indigenous people. Those who are responsible for practices that result climate change, such as large industry, company that are responsible for the destruction of nature and forest, must carry out their obligation to reduce climate change impacts, especially felt by indigenous people. In Indonesia, climate justice can be interpreted in a concrete way, namely binding obligation on companies that result forest loss for the development of oil palm plantation, because the impact is felt by indigenous people in Indonesia. As a researcher, as academy, I believe we can make a difference through direct involvement on environmental protection and climate change mitigation movement that's already there. We can strengthen the movement by producing fact-based knowledge on climate change to influence government institutions. Also, we can strengthen initiative at local level to put pressure on local governments to produce and to implement climate change mitigation policy in the local context. So the main idea is how to bring knowledge into practice to foster some initiatives that have been done by the city inhabitants as coping strategies to deal with the climate change impact on the local level that they face in their daily life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Listening to you, you just said the word anthropogenic. It's human-made. So if things are human-made, we can change it. And I'm very, very happy you addressed the calls for action to go into the talk with Tando Tillman and Kathleen de Vlander. They are the coordinators at the Global Center of Spatial Methods for Urban Sustainability at the TU Berlin. And they are accompanying these grade 4 PhD students in writing their proposals during a 6-month period, what they are doing just now. So I'm very much looking forward to the talk with them. Yeah, see you later then. Our PhD candidates addressed some serious subjects, such as droughts, water scarcity, heat erosion and floods. Und ich möchte jetzt direkt ins Deutsche zurückspringen, weil wir uns genau der Frage widmen werden, und das werden wir auf Deutsch tun, wie lässt sich mehr Klimagerechtigkeit planen? Und zwar ganz konkret gefragt, wie gelingt das mit vernetztem Denken für lokale Vision. Und das werde ich jetzt gleich mit Jan Trapp tun. Er ist Soziologe beim Deutschen Institut für Urbanistik in Berlin und er leitet dort das Team Infrastruktur und Sicherheit. Lieber Herr Trapp,
ja,
ganz schön feucht hier.
Ganz schön nass hier, ja, in der Tat.
Erste Frage direkt an Sie. Warum beschäftigt man sich als Soziologe mit Extremwetterlagen?
Ja, weil das Wetter natürlich mit uns als Person, als Gesellschaft auch zu tun hat. Es sind erstmal Klimatologen, die man da erwartet, oder Techniker oder Ingenieure. Wenn wir über Klima reden, dann reden wir aber natürlich auch immer über unser Wohlbefinden, darüber, wie wir mit Hitze umgehen oder wie wir uns aber auch gegenüber Starkregenereignissen wappnen können beispielsweise. Und da kommen wir dann eben sehr schnell, sag ich mal, in Fragen eher des gesellschaftlichen Handelns, des individuellen Handelns und aber auch natürlich des Planens. Und wir wissen alle, Klimaschutz ist eine gesamtgesellschaftliche Herausforderung. Da geht es auch viel um Akzeptanz und um Verhalten. Und insofern sind Soziologen auch bei den Fragen der Klimaanpassung und der Klimaextreme natürlich gefragt.
Jetzt haben wir einige Impulse gehört aus dem globalen Süden und Südosten. Wie weit sind denn unsere Städte vorbereitet für Starkregen und Extremwetterlagen?
Also wir erleben ja nicht nur in den vergangenen 2, 3, 4 oder 5 Jahren, sondern auch schon davor, dass Wetterextreme auch in Deutschland immer wieder auftreffen. Und wir erleben in den letzten Jahren durchaus auch die Tendenz, dass diese Wetterextreme stärker werden und zunehmen in ihrer Häufigkeit und in ihrer Periodizität irgendwie auch zunehmen. Und insofern ist das Thema klimaangepasste Stadtentwicklung in den deutschen Kommunen auf jeden Fall angekommen. Nicht erst seit diesem Jahr, sondern sicherlich auch schon seit geraumer Zeit. Die Städte sind da unterschiedlich weit, aber im Großen und Ganzen erkennen die Städte in Deutschland das als eines der Zukunftsthemen überhaupt, mit dem sich Städte und Stadtplanung in Deutschland auseinandersetzen muss.
Und ganz konkret nochmal nachgefragt, was passiert denn, wenn so ein Starkregen eine große Stadt bei uns erreicht? Ja. Was passiert dann?
Das Problem in den Städten im Vergleich zu den ländlichen Gebieten ist ja, dass wir in den Städten eine hohe bauliche Dichte haben und wir haben viele Flächen versiegelt. Und wenn jetzt das Regenwasser auf diese versiegelten Flächen trifft, dann kann es eben nicht in den Boden einsickern, was es irgendwie auf einer Wiese oder auf einem Acker tun würde, sondern es fließt erstmal oberflächlich ab. Und wenn wir dann noch, sage ich mal, ein bisschen Gelände haben, sowas, dann wird dieses Wasser halt sich irgendwo in Mulden oder in Senken aufstauen. Es kommt zu Überflutungen. Und dann haben wir, sag ich mal, Schäden, nicht nur an Gebäuden, an Infrastruktur, sondern eben auch möglicherweise Personenschäden.
Das eine sind starke Wetterregensituationen, das andere ist ja extreme Hitze. Also in Berlin, ich erinnere mich an die letzten Sommer, vor allem vorletzter Sommer, ja, unglaubliche Temperaturen. Ja. Müssen wir auch darüber dringend reden?
Auf jeden Fall. Also wir erleben im zunehmenden Klimawandel genau ein Verschieben dieser Wasser- oder Niederschlagsregime. Das heißt, es regnet nicht mehr wie früher, übers Jahr verteilt, wie wir es bisher kannten in gewisser Weise, sondern Spitzen nehmen zu. Und zu den zunehmenden Regenereignisspitzen gehört eben auch, dass wir längere Perioden haben, wo es gar nicht regnet, wo wir extreme Hitze haben. Und das ist im Grunde genommen nicht mal die Kehrseite der gleichen Medaille, sondern es ist wirklich in der Tat irgendwie das gleiche Phänomen. Wir haben einen zu viel und einen zu wenig.
Und beides durch den Klimawandel und durch unsere CO2-Emissions begründet.
Genau. Und das sogar auch oft irgendwie im gleichen Moment. Also wir können eine lange Hitzeperiode haben, haben dann ein Starkregenereignis, das innerhalb von 2 Stunden den Niederschlag eines Monats auf einen total trockenen Boden lässt. Und dann haben wir wieder 3 Monate Hitze oder Trockenheit. Insofern, dieser Regen, der in diesem einen Moment fällt, der ist quasi, als wäre er gar nicht gefallen, weil er einfach nur oberflächlich abfließt. Oder insofern muss man beides betrachten, Starkregen und Hitze. Und ich finde, jetzt wird es hier ganz schön nass.
Okay, also dann lassen Sie uns jetzt mal vom einen Extrem ins andere gehen. Ja? In Ordnung? Okay. Vielen Dank. Danke sehr.
Dankeschön.
Und wenn wir über Hitze in der Stadt reden, dann ist ja Hitze in der Stadt nicht gleich verteilt, wie ich von Ihnen gelernt habe.
Genau, also es gibt einerseits den gesamtstädtischen Hitzeinsel-Effekt, dass die Stadt sich gegenüber dem Umland natürlich aufheizt, einfach durch Asphalt, durch die Gebäude. Aber wenn wir, wie wir hier auf dieser Karte sehen, genau nochmal nachschauen in der Stadt, dann stellt man eben fest, dass es innerhalb der Stadt einzelne städtische Räume gibt, die sich unterschiedlich stark aufheizen und andere Räume wiederum nicht. Und das hat in erster Regel damit zu tun, dass je stärker versiegelt, das heißt auch je mehr Beton oder Asphalt in bestimmten städtischen Räumen ist, der sich eben durch die Sonneneinstrahlung extrem aufheizen kann, dass sich da die Stadt extrem aufheizt und andere Räume in der Stadt, die eher, viel Grün haben, ja, viele Bäume haben, Bäume spenden Schatten, eine Parkanlage, in der das Wasser auch verdunstet durch Verdunstungsgründe Verdunstung entsteht Kühle. Insofern städtische Räume, in denen viel Grün ist und weniger Beton, diese grünen Räume sich eben weniger stark aufheizen. Und das sieht man hier in dieser Karte wunderbar, wo man genau erkennen kann, im Grunde genommen, wo sind hochverdichtete, hochversiegelte Gebiete und wo sind eher städtische Räume, die vielleicht eine Freifläche haben. Man sieht auch hier sozusagen einen Fluss, der durch diese Stadt durchgeht. Auch das ist ein Element, wo natürlich die Temperatur sich nicht so stark aufheizt.
Und gehen Sie so weit als Soziologe zu sagen, da gibt es eine soziale Korrelation?
Es gibt nicht diese einfache Korrelation, dass man sagt, irgendwie ärmere Menschen leben in den besonders heißen Stadtteilen. Also so einfach ist es nicht. Es ist ein Stück weit komplexer, aber es ist natürlich in der Tat so, dass verschiedene sozioökonomische Statusgruppen in einer Stadt, also ärmere, reichere Bevölkerung, aber natürlich auch ältere und jüngere Menschen mit einer Cardio-Vorbelastung,
Herz-Kreislauf-Erkrankung.
Kreislauf-Erkrankung, genau. Die sind ja nicht gleich verteilt in der Stadt und insofern muss man schon immer genau hingucken, wer lebt da eigentlich wo. Also wenn wir jetzt hier über Berlin reden, dann ist das eine natürlich die Plattenbausiedlung am Stadtrand irgendwie. Da haben wir sicherlich eher keine Hitzeproblematik. Gleichzeitig leben dort eher, sag ich mal, jetzt nicht die besonders gut Betuchten. In Zehlendorf ist es ähnlich. So,
aber in Mitte,
wenn ich aber
da sind
nach
auch wenig
Mitte
Bäume
gucke, genau.
Und die Hips, ja.
Prenzlauer Berg, ne, hochverdichtetes Altbauquartier, irgendwie Mitte. Da haben wir vergleichsweise wenig Grünflächen auch und dort leben ja eher Bessergestellte. Insofern ist das so einfach nicht zu beantworten. Wichtig ist, wenn man auf Blick auf Klimagerechtigkeit kommt, dass man diese Diversität der Gesellschaft und die unterschiedlichen sozialen Fragen, dass man die, wenn man über Klimaanpassung spricht, auch mit in den Blick nimmt.
Wie tun Sie das? Also die Überschrift ist ja Planen für Klimagerechtigkeit. Ja. Was müssen wir in den Blick nehmen, wenn wir mehr Klimagerechtigkeit innerhalb einer Stadt organisieren wollen?
Also das eine ist natürlich, dass wenn ich neu baue in der Stadt, dass ich mir immer genau die Frage stelle, wo baue ich das? Also baue ich irgendwelche Frischluftschneisen zu oder so etwas? Ich verliere durch Neubautätigkeit in der Regel ja Freiräume. Also so, wie kann ich das dann irgendwie kompensieren durch Kompensationsmaßnahmen? Das andere ist die Frage natürlich stadtentwicklungsstrategisch auch gedacht. Setze ich gegebenenfalls mit neuen Formen der Wasserbewirtschaftung just in den Quartieren an, die heute schon besonders heiß sind, weil die Quartiere, die besonders heiß sind, also eine hohe Versiegelung haben, sind teilweise auch genau die städtischen Räume, die durch Überflutung im Starkregenfall natürlich betroffen sind.
Okay. Lassen Sie uns mal gucken. Sie haben uns eine technische Zeichnung mitgebracht, wo wir so eine Art Vertikalbegrünung etc. erleben. Können Sie uns mal erzählen, was das bringt und was genau passieren muss, damit das effektiv ist?
Ja. Genau, also das ist sozusagen ein Beispiel für zunächst einmal am Gebäude ein Stück weit vernetztes Planen. Das heißt, wir sagen, dass wenn ich über Regenwasser rede, ich dann eben im Grunde genommen nicht erst über den Regenwasserkanal nachdenke oder dann einfach die Dachrinne, sondern ich muss mir überlegen, wie kann ich das Regenwasser schon auf dem Gebäude möglichst lange zurückhalten, bevor es überhaupt in die Straße, in den Kanal gelangt und dann möglicherweise im Starkregenfall zu Überflutungen führt. Also Dach als Regenwasserspeicher, genau, möglichst viel oben drauf zurückhalten. Wenn noch Wasser vom Dach runterkommt, dann kann ich das eben unten am Gebäude in einem Regenwasserspeicher irgendwie zurückhalten und kann das Wasser natürlich aus diesem Speicher dann wiederum in der langen Trockenperiode auch nutzen, um beispielsweise an der Fassade oder Bäume, die am Gebäude stehen, zu bewässern, weil Grünfassaden, auch Gründächer und Bäume eben dann in der Hitze natürlich durch Verdunstung und durch Schatten Kühle spenden. Das heißt, die Temperatur im und am Gebäude bei Grünfassaden sich senken lässt.
Jetzt gibt es wahrscheinlich Unkenrufe von Leuten, die sagen, die ist wahnsinnig teuer, amortisiert sich nicht und so. Was sind Ihre Gegenargumente?
Meine Gegenargumente sind, dass und da kommen wir dann wieder zu einer soziologischen oder auch einer ökonomischen Frage natürlich. Es gibt Nutznießer und Leute, die natürlich auch ein Stück weit vielleicht auch zahlen. Das eine ist, betrachtet man das betriebswirtschaftlich auf der Gebäudeebene, dann kann es natürlich auch rational sein zu sagen, das ist jetzt irgendwie vielleicht dann doch eine hohe Investition, die sich nicht rechnet. Andererseits habe ich natürlich sag ich mal, eine Qualitätssteigerung irgendwie im Gebäude, die Aufenthalts- und Wohnqualität steigt. Und insofern ist das natürlich eine Investition. Andererseits, wenn man sich, sag ich mal, die Gesamtstadt anguckt unter volkswirtschaftlichen Fragen, dann sind solche Maßnahmen der dezentralen Regenwasserbewirtschaftung, sag ich mal, auf lange Perspektive natürlich günstiger, weil ich im Grunde genommen mit solchen Maßnahmen das als Teil irgendwie meiner Stadtentwässerung sehen muss. Und ich könnte alternativ natürlich jetzt in riesengroße Stauraumvorhaltungen im Kanal denken. Und das wird dann einfach extrem teuer. Und so im Grunde genommen ist das eine andere Form, im Grunde genommen hier einen anderen Weg zu finden, irgendwie das zu organisieren.
Wir stellen heute häufig die Frage, wie wollen wir eigentlich leben? Ja, über Wellbeing-Strategien und so weiter geht es. Inwiefern ist ein von Ihnen gedachtes, vernetztes Stadtquartier die eierlegende Wollmilchsau, mit der ganz viele Verliegen mit einer Klappe geschlagen werden? Und vielleicht
Ja, also eierlegende Wollmilchsau, weiß nicht, ob es die gibt, aber was wir in einem Forschungsprojekt Networks, was wir gemeinsam mit anderen Partnern auch bearbeitet haben, schon gesehen haben, ist, dass es verschiedene Bausteine gibt und diese Bausteine immer wiederum Effekte zu sehr unterschiedlichen planerischen Zielen auch beitragen können. Und dann reden wir eben über Ziele wie an den Erhalt des natürlichen Wasserhaushalts, Gewässerschutz. Wir reden aber auch über so Ziele wie Umweltbildung und Biodiversität in der Stadt. Und wenn ich eben sozusagen von der Wasserseite aus kommend Wasser in der Stadt nicht als ein Problem sehe, das ich möglichst schnell in den Kanal bringe und dann ableite, sondern wenn ich von vornherein konzeptionell mir überlege, wie kann diese graue technische Infrastruktur, also der Kanal...
Die nennen Sie grau generell.
Grau, genau. Also der Kanal, eine Anlage... Wie kann ich die von vornherein gemeinsam mit einer grünen Infrastruktur, und das wären dann diese Gründächer, Grünfassaden, Bäume, Parks, wie kann ich das von Anfang an gemeinsam vernetzt denken, um zwischen diesen beiden Infrastrukturen, sag ich mal, Pufferkapazitäten zu schaffen, sodass diese mit den Wetterextremen besser umgehen können.
Sie haben ein tolles Bild dazu mitgebracht, wo wir dieses Stadtquartier, das genau das tut, grün, blau, und grau miteinander zu verbinden, anschaulich macht. Da sieht man es.
Ja.
Also Wasser als Lebensraum?
Wasser, genau, Wasser als Lebensraum. Man kann sich hier diesen künstlichen Teich eben vorstellen, dass der mit Regenwasser von den Dächern gespeist wird beispielsweise. Das heißt, ich habe dann hier sozusagen eine Retentionsfläche. Gleichzeitig irgendwie natürlich so eine Wasserfläche im Sommer, einfach durch die Verdunstung des Wassers auch ein Stück weit Kühlung bringt. Und Sie sehen ja auch hier irgendwie so ich sag mal, so eine künstliche Wasserfläche, wenn sie dann auch noch schön gestaltet ist, ist natürlich auch immer irgendwie attraktiv. Also sich dort aufzuhalten, dort etwas zu tun. Entweder mit dem Wasser zu spielen, ja, so, also für Kinder attraktiv, oder auch einfach nur zu sitzen. Und dieses Verknüpfen und das integrierte Denken zwischen diesen grünen, das wäre eine blaue Infrastruktur sozusagen, wo das Wasser so dominant ist, und den grauen Infrastruktur. Das ist, denke ich, ein Ansatz, der uns in den Städten neben der Frage der Anpassung an den Klimawandel auch eben Effekte im Hinblick auf Lebensqualität bietet.
Und Sie haben noch ein Beispiel mitgebracht aus Singapur, was ich sehr spannend finde. Da ist Wasser gewissermaßen eher wieder als Bedrohung im Feld. Vielleicht können Sie dazu noch ein bisschen was erzählen?
Also wir sehen hier Bilder aus Singapur. Also natürlich, Wasser ist eine Bedrohung. Das haben wir auch in Deutschland ja erlebt, in Starkregenereignissen, Überflutungen. Sie denken an den Rhein, Elbe, Donau. Hochwasser sind uns ja auch wohl bekannt. Hier ist es so, dass man im Grunde genommen ein Gewässer, das durch die Stadt ging, sehr kanalisiert, begradigt war, dass man das wieder aufgebrochen hat, renaturiert hat, sodass man jetzt hier irgendwie im Grunde genommen einen städtischen Freiraum geschaffen hat, wo der Fluss durch die Stadt meandern kann. Und das Interessante ist eben, dass das Ganze so gestaltet ist, dass ich in einem Starkregenereignis hier eine Option habe, sag ich mal, dem Wasser Raum zu geben in der Stadt. Ja, wir kennen das beispielsweise die Umgestaltung der Isar in München, oder wir haben auch in Deutschland viele Beispiele, wo man genau diesen Ansatz verfolgt, dem Fluss wieder ein Stück weit mehr Raum in der Stadt zu geben, um dann in Hochwasserereignissen hier sich auch den Platz zu nehmen. Und möglicherweise braucht man diesen Raum bei dem Flusshochwasser oder im Überflutungsereignis eben halt dann auch nur einmal im Jahr. Und den Rest des Jahres ist das aber dann eben halt sag ich mal, eine grüne Infrastruktur, ein Park, der zu Freizeit- und Erholungszwecken nutzbar ist, wo ich einen Zugang zum Wasser habe, der aber planerisch und von der Gestaltung her so gestaltet ist, dass er eben im Grunde genommen für verschiedene Regenereignisse, Sie sehen das hier an diesen gestrichelten Linien.
Das sind die Eskalationsstufen.
Das sind im Grunde genommen die Eskalationsstufen, irgendwie je nach Niederschlagsereignis irgendwie geht es halt dann bis hier, und wenn es noch mehr regnet, kann das Wasser noch mal ein bisschen weitergehen. Und das, sag ich mal, ist
Und
ist
das
eine
Ganze
multifunktionale Fläche.
Multifunktionale Fläche und eine erfolgreiche, wenn ich Sie richtig verstehe, Klimaanpassungsstrategie.
Und ist eine Klimaanpassungsstrategie. Genau. Sag ich mal, der Punkt an dieser ganzen Sache ist natürlich, dass wir hier Flächen brauchen in der Stadt. Das ist in umkämpften Zeiten, gerade in der wachsenden Stadt, sind natürlich Flächen begehrt. Und insofern ist das natürlich schon irgendwie auch eine stark politische Frage. Wie gehe ich mit Flächen um? Wozu nutze ich Flächen? Wir haben hier eben ein Angebot, sage ich mal, ne, dass man in der Tat möglicherweise auch weiter verdichten kann, dass ich dann aber, wenn ich diese Gebäude baue, wir haben das in dem ersten Slide gesehen, eben konsequent die Gebäude begrüne. Am Dach, an der Fassade, sodass ich, sag ich mal, positive Klimaeffekte auch in der sich verdichtenden Stadt nach wie vor noch gewährleisten kann.
Herr Trapp, vielen Dank.
Ja.
Ihre soziologischen Impulse in Richtung einer grünen Zukunft.
Danke.
Danke Ihnen sehr. I'm now very glad to sit here with Thando Tillmann and Kathleen de Vlaanderen from the Global Center of Spatial Methods for Urban Sustainability at the TU in Berlin. We heard these incredible insights from your PhD candidates, Thando. And they were very precise in describing the challenging situations in their various countries. And we often in Europe or in the global north have the idea we have answers and solutions. How do you see it?
I think that's not the case. I think it doesn't make any sense. And I think a lot of our presumptions come from colonial knowledge systems, which have been in place for hundreds of years, really. I think that we need to rethink and relook at the way that we look at challenges and how we address those challenges with solutions which are from local experts and from local know-how.
What does it mean in depth? Colonial education system, the way you would address it?
The way I would address it is that in many parts of the world, including where I'm from in Southern Africa, our country was colonized by the British, and systems were put in place in education and politics in the legal system which catered to a very small minority of the population at that time. Those systems are no longer relevant for the lives that we're leading today, and they need to be dismantled and challenged and addressed, and they can only be addressed and challenged by people who are living in those countries now and the realities that they face today.
The candidates talked a lot about the need of policy making to change, yeah? And they talked a lot about the responsibility in the future and in the present of academia. What kind of responsibility do you think researchers have today and tomorrow?
I think especially if you're talking about urban sustainability, about environmental change and social change, I think academia cannot be apolitical anymore. I think we have to take a stance, or the knowledge that is produced in academia will only go to the most powerful. So I think we have to steer as well, that it goes to those people that need the change the most.
What means to become political as a scientist? What does it implement, or what does it embrace?
It means that you choose in the way knowledge can be used, because knowledge can be used in various ways. Exactly the same data or exactly the same knowledge can be steered in various ways. So it is, I think, the need also to be able to speak to politicians, to be able to speak also to people in the street, and to be a bridge between that.
We signed the treaty in 2015 to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. 193 countries, yeah? Germany was one amongst them. We have indicators that indicate where we stand. How reliable are these indicators from your perspective?
Well, I think, we were having this conversation earlier, Kathleen, about how the indicators are often adjusted to suit political, for political reasons, and the goalposts are continuously changed. So I don't think that the indicators are necessarily as reliable as we are perhaps led to believe by certain politicians and systems. I think one needs to look at them critically and to get a true understanding of where it is that we actually stand.
And they're very often also just quantitative measures.
Yeah.
If you think, for instance, of we need affordable, safe transport for all.
Yeah.
The way this is measured is, I mean, what does this mean from the very beginning? This is a qualitative question because it means something different for a woman or for a man or for someone in Southern Africa than someone here. So I think this methods need to be both qualitative and quantitative, and there needs to be this transdisciplinary discussion of how.
Which kind of disciplines do you want to bring to the table together?
Well, at the moment, we're very much talking about practitioners and urban planners, architects, so the urban designers, the ones that actually put things in place. We have on the other side the policymakers, and on the very other side, we have, well, not the very other side, that's actually the point, not to have them on the other side, to have social sciences, geographers, etc. And they usually speak very different languages. So it is a very learning process, what we're doing also with the PhD candidates, to make them talk to each other. And it's very beautiful what comes out sometimes.
We come back to the youngsters later, to the new generation that are also the activists.
Yes.
But maybe sticking with an example, for example, compensation projects. We think, okay, we are still emitting CO2 emissions, but we have these compensation projects, we are paying for them. How do you view them? From a global perspective?
I think they all often do things more wrong than right, because it is a mechanism that we're not changing ourselves, but we have lots of effect. For instance, if you have the tree planting projects where trees are planted, in principle, nobody can have anything against them. But they're often non-endemic species in southern countries, and they have very negative local effects, changing the whole water cycle, local water cycle, and leading to water scarcity. So I think we have to see the whole picture and not just the carbon credits points, because we're doing
the whole picture. Your PhD candidates talked a lot about participation of civic society.
Right.
What are strategies that you really think are leading to change? Maybe not in a leapfrogging way, but to systematic change that are very reliable, let's say.
I'm sorry, could you...
I could reframe the question. Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Your PhD candidates talked a lot about participation and the need of participation of civic society. Yeah. What kind of participatory methods do you think are helpful?
I think it is very necessary to be vocal and active. I mean, we have the cases of several climate activists who have been very vocal in getting their voices out there in order to get change brought about as far as with climate change issues. And I think those are critical. I think those young voices of young climate activists and justice activists are extremely important. I think case in point is a young activist I'm thinking of in particular from Uganda. Her name is Vanessa Nakati, and she very famously was cut out of a picture from after the Davos summit with Greta Thunberg and other activists. And that would, to me, it sort of highlighted sort of what our problems are, that, you know, we've got these problems and we've got these voices from the global south, but they're not being sort of included in the discussion at hand. So instead of hearing about the sort of green solutions she's coming up with for schools with eco stoves and solar panels, where she's probably more famous for the fact that she was cut out of this picture. And I think that's a real pity, because I think there is a lot of activity and there are a lot of people who are very engaged, and I think we need to rein in those voices and amplify them.
Seeing the time frame we have, 2030, 2050, to reach the goals, of what help is digitization, do you think? In really connecting globally, these kind of activists and creating the change, also as a bottom-up movement. What do you think? How helpful, how positive are you on that?
I come from both sides on that matter. I think it definitely can have its good effects, but I don't think we should trust completely on everything that's happening because of high tech or digitalization. I think most of the best solutions come from places of need and necessity and about simple solutions. And even though many of the digitization solutions come from the global south, but exactly because there was a need and not the the super high-tech solutions that often come from the global north. And I think that there's also in that way, there's a big difference.
Talking about needs, do you think COVID-19 as a global crisis is a reasonable teacher for what you are pleading for?
I think the pandemic has been a great, we've had good examples of how things can be different. We've seen politicians listen to scientists, something which climate scientists have been struggling for, to get them to do for many years. And we have seen people realize that they are adaptable, that we can change, that we can do things different. Systems which are set in place are not necessarily the systems that we have to move forward with. There is a potential for perhaps having a green recovery. I'll go back to the activist I was talking about earlier, Vanessa Nakati. She says, and I love this quote, we can't eat coal, we can't drink oil, we can't put fossil fuels on the table. We need the planet needs people. We are interdependent upon one another, and that's what matters. And I think this pandemic has really highlighted that and brought that more to the fore.
Anything you want to add, Kathleen? This is almost like a final sentence.
It's beautiful.
Anything, but maybe I have a last question to you. Beyond the concerns that I feel when I talk to you, what gives you really hope that change is possible within the time we have to manage the climate crisis, we as humans?
I think local change, we're seeing it every day. And I think I would go for putting my hopes in that and putting my hopes in people and not so much on big solutions. So I think the many little ones can creep up and make a change.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are connected with Maria Vasilako. She's a former politician and she has been the vice mayor and city councillor of Vienna. And during her terms, she has created a very visible and incredible impact in the city. Her mission are and is climate neutral and smart cities. And she's now riding the slope between vision and reality. And we are very, very happy to be digitally connected with you now. Maria, are you there? Yeah, there you are. There's a lot to chew on. So what I would like to do is really to bring things down and maybe re-question some of the subjects you put on the plate, because it's very, very, very complex. Maybe let me start at the very beginning of the general concept of climate neutrality and climate justice. How key is it to put it in the heart, in the very heart of future urban planning, from your experience?
Well, I would say it is key to the future of mankind. And it's not only key to the future of mankind in terms of environmental protection, it really means creating cities as places for life. It is actually at the heart of livability. And it's about realizing that the way we organize our cities is in the end the way we organize our lives. So if we plan them in a sustainable way, it ends up, and let me bring you just one example. It ends up with us having up to 2 to 3 hours in addition per day that we could spend the way we want to spend them. Perhaps productively, perhaps just play with our kids or, go for a long walk. Rather than spend them in congestion in our cars trying to get somewhere. And believe me, I know what I'm talking about because I grew up in Athens, and I spent 2 hours a day in the car trying to get to school
in the car
and back.
Yeah, we have this word of for autogerechte Stadt in German, yeah? That the car is in the very heart. If I get you right, and the person, the human, and the families are at the very center of a city, you are addressing two main words. One is livability, you just put it on the plate. The other one is affordability. How to create, on a large scale, affordability of housing in really condensed cities of the future of tomorrow?
Well, I would say affordability has a lot to do with density, to start with this. And of course, it's about investing in social housing, or let's perhaps not talk about social housing. Let's name it subsidized housing, because this is what it is, on behalf of the cities. And now there are several models that have been extremely successful, most notably Vienna, that has actually, in the meantime, created a stock of altogether about 230,000 public housing units, and then another 250,000 approximately subsidized housing units. And believe me, it's so profitable that the limited profit corporations that engage in subsidized housing actually push for more and more, because out of law they have to reinvest the profits. So I can tell you, subsidized housing is not only a way of providing middle class, because in the end it is a middle class subsidy, with decent and affordable housing. It's a key to creating cities that work perfectly, that are open, that have an even socioeconomic distribution, and that once again do not push people outside the borders into the countryside.
You have a concept of a city, as far as if I get you right, that a child-friendly city is a good city for all. I would like to understand why you think so, and if all the other board members in your EU board for the mission of this city of tomorrow are pulling on the same string.
Well, the idea of a child-friendly city is actually something that has been decisive to the way I have gone about my active years in politics. Because I deeply, deeply believe that what we believe that makes our children happy is what makes us happy as well. And that in the end, it's about happiness. And that livable cities are cities that are places where we live because we want to and not because we have to. Which then means that we have to provide these qualities at the heart of our cities. We have to think in a transformative way about cities. We have to, for instance, invest in transforming public space, and rediscovering the street as a place for life within the city, and not only as a place for mobility. Just to give you a few clues about what I mean when I talk about child-friendly. But in the end, it has, of course, something to do with the mission, even though it is not an attitude and approach, that would correspond, to the ideas of the entire board. And it has something to do with the mission, because yet again, affordable cities with high life qualities are cities where you can have everything you need within, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes walk. You have short distances. You have public transport access. So already by organizing things like this, you're actually at the heart of an efficient city. And we all know that one of the main keys we have to turn towards climate neutrality is mobility. And the second key we have to turn is actually retrofitting buildings, which then means a high degree of investment, of course, to retrofit hundreds and thousands of housing units, which is, of course, intertwined with housing affordability in the first place.
Another resource you are often talking about is the resources of the civic society itself, taking action, becoming stakeholders, being integrated in processes and planning. How do you really see that there's a fruitful road to the way you envision civic society as a real main stakeholder?
Well, I think this is quite a challenge for many, many cities across Europe, because not everybody has the tradition or the structures, as a matter of fact, and knows how to involve citizens. But there's no other way to go about it if we want to achieve climate neutrality. And I mean, let's not talk about climate neutrality all the time, because this is just, in the end, it's just a word. A notion. Let's talk once again about livable, beautiful cities that we love.
Any
Well, the
examples?
only way
Can you give, what are the cities you are talking about besides Vienna? Or what are the examples in Vienna you want to share to say, here we did it, that's the way we did it, and that's the way they did it there?
Okay, I think that there are different examples from different cities, but I'm a big fan of actually the Netherlands. We have wonderful examples there. We have Rotterdam that has been actually transforming itself for some years now, and just a walk around Rotterdam will show you what it actually really looks like when a city starts investing in public space, investing in traffic calming, just to give you two examples. We have Amsterdam that have a wonderful initiative, the so-called city makers, who are organized, by a hub which is called Pakhuis des Wiege, where they bring together citizens that have ideas together with people from academia, businesses. And what is wonderful about the way they go about it is that they bring together people that start right now with pioneers, with people that have already experience in doing something. So I really mean this. I could go on for hours and hours. There are so many ways cities can go about, fixing all these challenges. And what we have to do is to learn from each other and to work together and to partner and to learn from the ones that already know how to do it at a city and at a regional level.
What is the biggest challenge in really scaling that up? Is it governance? Is it missing leadership from policymakers? What else is it? What are really the key issues that are the main challenges?
I would say it is most probably capacity building in the end.
From whom to whom? In whom?
Well, from city to city. So I think that what we need is, first of all, peer-to-peer work between cities, where we can learn from each other, and knowing, of course, that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions, which means that we have to train people to show them how to go about something, and then they will work it out themselves, it is that they will really be doing in the end. And I would say the second huge challenge, once again, is not only activating citizens, but providing structures and also legal structures that will facilitate citizen action.
That means, for example, just practically asking, what does that mean, these kind of structures?
Well, just let me give you an example from Vienna. We came up with the idea some years ago to say, well, we will give a small grant to people that have an idea of how to transform their own street and neighborhood. There's all these small underused corners that we all have, and you may want to create a parklet there. And we said, here's a small grant, do whatever you want to do there, more or less. But there's one precondition: it has to be open to everybody for use without having to pay entrance or having to consume something. And believe me, it's been quite tricky in the beginning to create a contract, a prototype contract, allowing for people to use public space temporarily without having to pay for it. And of course, with sorting out all types of responsibility and safety issues that might arise out of this. So this is just a small example, but it just shows that, involving the people is not something that you go like, and it's done, right?
Yeah, what's interesting, listening to you, I hear a new sense of ownership between your lines on behalf of the civic society and on behalf of different stakeholders in collaboration.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yes, of course. It's like realizing that, everybody likes talking about behavioral change, and I have to be honest, I detest it a little bit because it makes me, I don't know, it makes me feel of mice, think of mice or rabbits. I think it's about actually motivating people and making them believe that they can make the difference and that their action is welcome.
Yeah, but you know,
once again,
not to go against what you say, but if I see the administration sometimes, and maybe I don't mean the people, I mean the administrative structures themselves that are kind of standing against the freedom you are sharing with us.
I don't really think so. It's just that we all have to learn working together in new schemes. So administrations have to learn, coping with this new way to go about things. And once again, they can do so, especially learning from peers that have long experience in doing this and working together with the people. And it's us, the people, that also have to actually learn how to navigate within systems and kind of not only just have an idea, but do something about it. And here again, we have very active communities and early adopters that, go about transforming, once again, the street in front of their homes. But altogether, it is a new way of designing policy bottom up, of creating action bottom up, of creating strategies bottom up. And I will go so far as to say it's the only way of going about creating beautiful cities. And once again, it's the only way we can arrive at climate neutrality.
We might quote you. We might quote you with that sentence at the Futurium. Yeah. One last question from me. Would you frame the sentence as used normally to say, think global, act locally, or act local? Or would you also reframe it to say, think local and transform globally?
I would say there's no better way how I could sum it up myself. It's actually about a transformation from global to local and from local to global. So you can actually change, there's a quote that says, if you save a child, you save the world.
The world, yeah.
I would say, well, change your neighborhood, change the entire world.
Maria, thank you very much for this optimistic comment. We have asked the global community online via Twitter, what do they think? Do they think the European Union will manage to organize climate neutrality by 2050? And these are the answers. Yeah, we get various. There were 150 people or more answering the question, and I read it to you. So, will we manage, or will the EU manage? And they said yes, 21.3%, no, 60.6%, and maybe, I don't know, 18.1%. So after all your positive thinking, this is a kind of a bit of a water into the wine. This is a feeling of the public we have here. How do you read these figures?
Well, they don't surprise me. I have to confess, this was my first reaction when we formulated the mission. But I will have to disagree with everybody, and I'll have to disagree even with myself in my first reaction. I think we can make it. Or perhaps we can be on such a good way that if it's not 2050, it's like 2055.
Okay.
But believe me, the only way to make it is to get started now.
Okay. One very last question. How can we create speed? Because the climate change is not waiting for us.
Well, by starting now. Now. Let's go.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So we did. I hope you enjoyed this episode. There are 3 more episodes to see. One is on who and what makes the city. The other one on what makes our cities safe and safer. And the third one on well-being and stress in the city. So hopefully see you again at Urbane Welten TV. Bye-bye.